The galactic archive of the Genkar contained exactly 47 billion files, and Blip Vaughan had been cataloguing them for 9 years. 9 years of soup recipes, failed treaties, and bureaucratic documents that made paint drying look exciting. He was wedged between 2 stacks when he found it, a red crystal hidden behind a 3,000-year-old recipe for flan soup that had caused a civil war. Red crystals meant classified information, dangerous information, or someone's embarrassing poetry collection. Being a responsible archivist, he accessed it immediately. The warning label appeared in 17 languages. Warning! Elder-level classification. Penalty for violation may include being assigned to catalogue the Vorgian Empire bureaucracy files. Blip Vaughan pressed, "Continue anyway." 9 years of soup recipes had made him bold. The title appeared, "The Absolute and Complete Guide to Species You Should Never Provoke Unless You Have a Death Wish. Humans, Special Addendum." His optical stalks perked up. This was already more interesting than soup. The elders have determined that future civilizations should be aware of certain universal truths regarding humans. This file was created out of a deep desire to not write any more of these files because someone couldn't follow simple instructions. The humans are native to Earth, which is a terrible name because they also call dirt Earth. Their planet is 70% water, which they named the sea, demonstrating their creative naming abilities. However, none of this is why this file exists. This file exists because of the rule. The text grew larger and began pulsing ominously. Under no circumstances should any civilization engage humans in combat while they are on, near, or within reasonable distance of the sea. Blip Vaughan blinked all 7 eyes. The sea? What was special about water? The file continued, as if anticipating this question. "We understand this seems arbitrary. It is not. It is the result of painful, expensive, and deeply embarrassing experience." Historical records followed. The Battle of Salamis, where Greeks obliterated a Persian fleet in a narrow strait. The Spanish Armada, where English ships loaded with explosives were sailed into the enemy fleet at night. The Battle of Trafalgar, where British ships charged perpendicular to enemy lines and captured 22 ships without losing one. The pattern continued. Every time humans fought on water, results were disproportionately devastating. Then came the incident. The Krellian supremacy arrived in Sol System in 2651. They demanded tribute. Humans declined. Krellians decided to demonstrate superiority by attacking a remote island research facility. What they did not know was that the island housed a Royal Navy submarine base. The attack began at 800 hours. By 8:03 hours, the Krellian fleet was in full retreat. 3 minutes. Submarines launched coordinated counterstrike using modified nuclear weapons. But it wasn't the weapons that shocked them. It was the coordination. Submarines moved like parts of a single organism, executing maneuvers that seemed to defy technological limitations. 3 Krellian ships severely damaged. 2 forced emergency landings. The rest fled. The elders reviewed the incident, reviewed human history, and created the rule. Blip Vaughan scrolled down. Then his lymphatic fluid went cold. Critical update, year 2847. Despite clear documentation, the Krellian supremacy has announced plans to return to Sol System. Supreme Admiral Zixthara the Magnificent has declared previous incident an aberration and stated that ancient warnings from paranoid elders will not prevent Krellians from reclaiming honor. Admiral Zixthara plans to challenge humans in the Atlantic Ocean. The elders have officially washed their hands of this situation. Blip Vaughan checked the date. 3 weeks ago, which meant right now the Krellians were probably approaching Earth. He accessed the Galactic News Network. Breaking. Krellian fleet enters Sol System. Admiral Zixthara promises to teach humans the meaning of naval superiority. Below that, betting pools opening. Odds heavily favor Krellian victory. Elder Council issues statement consisting entirely of "really" followed by prolonged sighing. Blip Vaughan made a decision. He was going to watch this unfold and document every moment. This was going to be either incredibly educational or incredibly entertaining, possibly both. Admiral Zix Thara the Magnificent stood on the bridge of supremacy's glory, feeling magnificently superior. This was his natural state. 7 feet tall, ceremonial armor costing more than planets' defense budgets, and a jaw that could cut glass. Captain Vreltok the Adequate approached with a datapad. "Admiral, another communication from the Elder Council. Delete it! The Elders are paranoid. They've forgotten what it means to be warriors. Sir, the message references the rule about humans and maritime combat." "The rule!" Zix Thara spun dramatically. He'd practiced that spin for months. "The rule is based on one incident from 200 years ago involving incompetent command. My great-great-grandfather commanded that fleet, and frankly, he was an idiot." This was true. Admiral Krelmak, the somewhat confused, had once gotten lost on his own flagship for 6 hours. Lieutenant Crixnall the Nervous approached. "Sir, I've been reviewing human naval warfare records. I really think we should reconsider." "Lieutenant, are you questioning my tactical genius?" "No, sir. I'm questioning our chances of survival, sir." The bridge went silent. Zix Thara's face turned purple. "Are you suggesting the Krellian supremacy might be in danger from a species using metal boats?" "That's what concerns me, sir. They still use metal boats in space. They integrated maritime forces with space forces, and somehow it works. Who does that?" "Enough, you will spend this mission in your quarters contemplating positive thinking." Crixnall left, muttering about updating her will. "Sir, approaching designated coordinates," Vreltok announced. "Earth's ocean zone in 30 minutes. "Excellent. Begin recording. I want shocked human faces to become legendary." What Zix Thara didn't know was that the Galactic News Network had sent 3 film crews. And on Earth, in a situation room beneath the Atlantic, Royal Navy officers were having morning tea and discussing the situation with casual competence that would have made Krellians evacuate their bowels. Commodore Harriet Thornton Chase set down her Earl Grey. "Right then, what have we got?" Commander James Wickham pulled up tactical display. 16 Krellian warships, ma'am. V formation heading straight for our operational zone. Broadcasting demands that we acknowledge their authority. Have we responded? We sent them polite message directing them to diplomatic channels, reminding them they're violating 47 treaties. And their response? Their admiral called us primitive water-dwelling mammals and said he'd accept our surrender any time we felt reasonable. Commodore Thornton Chase sipped tea. How rude. What's our operational status? 3 attack submarines, HMS Tenacious, HMS Relentless, and HMS Audacious, all fully loaded. 2 Type 45 destroyers on patrol. And the Americans? They offered the USS Theodore Roosevelt Carrier Group. We politely declined. Good, this is our ocean. Thornton Chase studied the Krellian fleet. We're going to give them every chance to leave peacefully. We're going to follow every regulation, every treaty, every rule. We're going to be so professional that historians will conclude we did absolutely everything by the book. She stood. But if they insist on unauthorized military operations in British territorial waters, they're going to learn why the Royal Navy has operated continuously for 500 years. Contact HMS Tenacious. Tell Captain Reynolds to establish visual contact. 21 minutes later, HMS Tenacious rose to periscope depth 3 miles from the Krellian fleet. Captain Daniel Reynolds watched through the periscope. "Bloody hell, those are ugly ships," his first officer whispered. "Beauty is subjective," Reynolds said mildly. "Perhaps bulbous angular protrusions covered in spikes are elegant in Krellian culture." "Sir, they're hailing us. Put them through." "Attention, human vessel. This is Admiral Zix Thara. Surface immediately and prepare to be escorted to safety." Captain Reynolds responded like someone answering a wrong number. "Good morning, Admiral. This is Captain Reynolds of HMS Tenacious. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. These are British territorial waters under international and interstellar law. You're violating 47 treaties. I can transmit relevant documentation. Treaties? We are the Krellian supremacy. We do not recognize primitive legal frameworks. That's lovely, but treaties exist whether you recognize them or not, rather like gravity. If you turn around and file paperwork with the Foreign Office, this can be sorted over tea and biscuits. Long pause. You dare speak to me of paperwork? I am Admiral Zixthara the Magnificent, and I'm Captain Reynolds the polite but increasingly concerned about those treaties. The only thing I wish to hear is your surrender. Surface your vessel. Acknowledge Krellian superiority. Reynolds looked at his first officer, who was trying not to laugh. Sir, he can't be serious. I believe he is, unfortunately. Reynolds returned to communication. Admiral, I'm giving you one more chance. This is the Atlantic Ocean. We've operated here since 1546. We know every current, every thermal layer, every underwater mountain. You're in our element. Please turn around and file your paperwork. Your threats amuse me. What can one primitive submarine do against 16 capital ships? Let me answer with a question. How many submarines do you think we have? Pause. Our sensors detect only your vessel. And how deep can your sensors actually penetrate seawater? Much longer, less confident pause. I'll be remaining on station, Admiral. I'm required to observe violations of territorial waters. Do have a pleasant morning. He cut communication and lowered periscope. Take us down to 300 feet, silent running. Let's show them how submarines work. On Supremacy's glory, Zixthara experienced his first doubt. Vreltok! How many submarines could they have? Intelligence suggests 15 total, given ocean size and global commitments, probably 3 in this area. 3 submarines, confidence returned, against 16 capital ships. This is nothing. Continue advance, prepare demonstration. What Zixthara didn't know was that Captain Reynolds hadn't been threatening. He'd been advising, and the Royal Navy hadn't deployed 3 submarines. They'd deployed 7. The other 4 had been waiting silently for days. On HMS Audacious, Captain Elizabeth Winters checked weapons and smiled. Her crew was bored. This situation was about to become interesting. Con, sonar, 16 large vessels heading directly for us. 8 minutes. Excellent. Maintain silent running. Let's see if they can detect us when we don't want to be detected. 8 minutes later, the Krellian fleet passed directly over HMS Audacious without detecting it. Captain Winters noted this with satisfaction. On HMS Relentless, Captain Mohammed Hassan had been taking sensor readings. What he discovered was encouraging and disappointing. Encouraging because humans maintained technological advantage. Disappointing because he'd hoped for a challenge. Sir, they're setting up in line formation, powering weapons. Target appears to be empty ocean. They're planning to shoot water. Appears so, sir. That seems pointless. Keep monitoring. The Krellian fleet arranged in a perfect line. Admiral Zixthara felt magnificent again. Commence demonstration. Fire on designated coordinates. Show these humans Krellian power. 16 ships fired simultaneously on empty ocean. Water exploded spectacularly. Steam rose hundreds of feet. It was impressive. It was also completely useless because there was nothing there. Sir, should we have selected a target that actually exists? Vreltok asked. The target is symbolic. We're demonstrating capability. Yes, sir. The ocean appears thoroughly destroyed, sir. Excellent. Broadcast on all human frequencies. Tell them this awaits any vessel refusing to acknowledge superiority. On HMS Tenacious, Reynolds listened with an expression suggesting someone had announced the sky was cheese. Sir, are we responding? Not yet. Let's see if they commit to being this stupid. In the Situation Room, Commodore Thornton Chase watched with weary exasperation. They're shooting empty water. Why are they shooting water? Wickham asked incredulously. Because they think it's intimidating. Has anyone fired on us or our vessels? No, ma'am. Just shooting water. Then we have no justification for engagement. Continue monitoring. Record everything. On Supremacy's glory, Zixthara waited for response and waited. Why aren't they responding? We demonstrated overwhelming firepower. Sir, we shot at empty ocean. It was symbolic. Perhaps humans don't understand symbolism, sir. Everyone understands symbolism. Fine. If they need direct demonstration, we'll give one. Find that submarine. Sensor operators frantically scanned. Found nothing. The Atlantic was very large, very deep, and full of thermal layers that ruined sensors designed for space combat. After 20 minutes, "Sir, we cannot locate the submarine. It has to be down there somewhere." "Yes, sir, but ocean is 3 miles deep, and our sensors are optimized for space, not underwater vessels in environments with thermal layers, varying salinity, marine life. I don't want excuses, I want results." After 40 fruitless minutes, Zixthara made a decision that would be studied in military academies as exactly what not to do. "If we cannot find them, we'll force them to reveal themselves, commence saturation bombardment. If the submarine is there, our weapons will destroy it or force it to surface." Vreltok looked ill. "Sir, that violates 12 additional treaties and could be considered an act of war. We're already in their waters conducting military demonstrations. How much more of an act of war can it be?" Vreltok admitted the Admiral had a point, even if it was terrible. "Commence firing!" The Krelian fleet opened fire on ocean with aggressive enthusiasm. Water boiled, steamed, and remained entirely unimpressed. On HMS Tenacious, Reynolds swore quietly. "They've actually done it. Hostile intent. Rules of engagement are active." He contacted the Situation Room. "Tenacious to Commodore. Hostile bombardment of our operational area. Request permission to engage." Commodore Thornton Chase had been waiting. "All submarines, this is Commodore Thornton Chase. You are weapons free. I repeat, weapons free. Disable their vessels. Try not to kill anyone. And remember, the entire galaxy is watching. Show them how the Royal Navy conducts itself." Across 7 submarines, crews sprang into action with coordinated precision. "Firing point procedures, target flagship," Reynolds commanded. "Prepare 1 torpedo, low yield, target propulsion." "Solution ready, sir. Match bearings and shoot." The torpedo left the tube at 45 knots. On the Krelian flagship, nobody noticed until 8 seconds from impact. Their sensors detected objects moving at light speed fractions, not 45 knots through water. "Sir, underwater contact, incoming, brace for impact." Zixthara had 2 seconds before the torpedo struck the drive system. The warhead was calibrated to disable, not destroy. The ship lurched sideways. Lights flickered. Alarms screamed. In engineering, the chief engineer discovered his drive system had become expensive modern art. What was that? Torpedo strike from below, direct hit on propulsion. Where did it come from? Unknown. Sensors didn't detect launch. 6 more torpedoes struck 6 more ships in rapid succession, each perfectly placed, each from different directions. "How many submarines are down there?" Vreltok demanded, bleeding from a forehead cut. 7 distinct launch positions, sir." 7? Intelligence said 3. Intelligence was wrong, sir. "Return fire. Target launch positions." "Sir, by the time we target a position, the submarine has moved. They're using thermal layers and underwater terrain. We can't maintain target lock." On HMS Relentless, Hassan watched Krelians firing at where he'd been 30 seconds ago. He was currently 500 feet deeper and half a mile east. "They're thinking like Space Forces," his tactical officer observed. "But space is empty. The ocean is full. Firing point procedures. Target their second largest vessel. Solution ready. Match bearings and shoot." Another torpedo. Another lesson in naval warfare. The battle lasted 17 minutes. All 16 Krelian ships had damaged propulsion. Not one submarine was hit, detected, or properly targeted. Admiral Zixthara stood on a bridge that looked earthquake-damaged. Half his screens were dark. "Status report." Captain Vreltok, now bandaged, read from a shaking datapad. "All 16 ships' mobility impaired. We're dead in the water, metaphorically, since we're in space, above water. You understand, sir? Casualties? Surprisingly light, mostly bruises and broken bones. Whoever's commanding those submarines deliberately avoided lethal strikes. How dare they? How dare they show us mercy? That's more insulting. Sir, communication from human submarine force. Put it through. Captain Reynolds' voice, perfectly calm and slightly amused. Good afternoon, Admiral Zixathara. Captain Reynolds again. I hope everyone is unharmed. We've taken great care to disable without casualties. You attacked us. I'm afraid you attacked us first. We have 17 minutes of footage showing your fleet conducting saturation bombardment of British waters. We responded with appropriate defensive measures. Our legal team will find we were entirely within rights. Zixthara's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Now, your vessels are disabled but not destroyed. Your crews are safe. We're contacting Galactic Rescue Service. I suggest you remain where you are and don't attempt further hostile action. We have your positions locked, and frankly, Admiral, you don't want to find out what happens if we use lethal force. But 7 submarines? Intelligence said 3. Did they? How unfortunate. Perhaps your intelligence should consider we don't report exact submarine positions to potential hostile forces. Just a thought. Pause. Then Reynolds' tone changed. Still polite, but with a knife's edge. Admiral Zixthara, let me be very clear. The Royal Navy has operated continuously since 1546. 501 years of institutional knowledge about naval warfare. We've been fighting at sea since before your species achieved spaceflight. We know these waters. We know this environment. We know our business. You came into our ocean, ignored our warnings, violated our territory, and attacked our forces. You did this because you thought ancient elders were paranoid. Another pause. The elders were not paranoid, Admiral. They were generous. They gave you one rule: don't fight humans at sea, and you couldn't even follow that. The communication cut off. Silence on the bridge, broken only by alarms and quiet sobbing from the junior sensor operator who'd tried to warn everyone. Zixathara sat in his broken command chair and stared at the ceiling. His confidence was gone. His pride was gone. His career was gone. All that remained was understanding that he'd become a galactic laughingstock. Contact Galactic Rescue Service, he said quietly. Tell them we need assistance, all 16 ships. Yes, I know how that sounds. Just do it. And High Command, sir? No, not yet. Give me 6 hours to think of an explanation that doesn't make me sound like the biggest idiot in galactic history. Sir, with respect, you won't find that explanation. On the moon, orbiting nothing, Blipvorn watched with awe. The Galactic News Network had captured everything. Military experts from 40 species were weighing in. The consensus was universal. Humans had given a master class in submarine warfare. One Vorgath analyst summed it up. This wasn't just military engagement. This was demonstration of what happens when you fight a species in their element. Humans didn't win with superior technology. They won with superior knowledge. Another analyst added, "Notice not one Krellian died. This wasn't battle. This was a lesson. Humans could have destroyed that fleet. Instead, they disabled it and let everyone live. That's not mercy, that's confidence." Blipvorn opened his documentation file and began typing furiously. He titled the new section, "The Second Incident," or How Admiral Zixathara Learned That Some Rules Exist for Very Good Reasons. In the Situation Room, Commodore Thornton Chase allowed herself a small smile as diplomatic channels exploded. The Krellian supremacy was issuing formal apologies. The Elder Council was issuing "we told you so" statements in 17 languages. "Ma'am, Foreign Office wants to know if we need diplomatic support," Wickham announced. "Tell them we have the situation well in hand. All actions conducted in accordance with law. We have complete documentation. They're asking if this affects trade negotiations?" Thornton Chase snorted. "If anything, this improves our position." "Nothing says take us seriously, like disabling a hostile fleet without breaking a sweat. Should we make a public statement? Absolutely not! Let footage speak for itself. We're victims who happen to be extremely good at defending ourselves. Lieutenant Commander O'Brien approached, grinning. Ma'am, the Galactic Military Academy already added this to curriculum. They're calling it a case study in naval superiority and why you should listen to ancient warnings. Have they really? Well, that's flattering. More, ma'am. Krellian supremacy issued formal apology and agreed to pay reparations. They've announced Admiral Zix Ithara has been relieved of command and reassigned to reviewing historical military documentation with particular emphasis on institutional memory and traditional warnings. So they've made him read the files he should have read in the first place. Appears so. Poetic justice. Thornton Chase picked up her tea, which had gone cold. She made a face. Right. Contact all submarines. Tell them to return to base, and for God's sake, someone get me fresh tea. This one tastes like disappointment. 3 days later, Galactic News Network ran a special report. The Rule, a historical analysis of why ancient warnings should not be ignored. The narrator, Thripvox, spoke in serious tones. 3 days ago, the Krellian supremacy learned a lesson taught, forgotten, and taught again throughout galactic history. When elders give you a rule about humans, you should probably listen. Admiral Zix Ithara, commanding 16 capital ships, entered Sol system intending to demonstrate military superiority. He'd read historical warnings, he'd reviewed files about the first Krellian incident, and he decided ancient warnings were superstition. What followed was one of the most one-sided engagements in modern military history. 7 human submarines disabled 16 capital ships in 17 minutes without suffering a single casualty. But why are humans so effective at naval warfare? The answer lies in their evolutionary history. Humans evolved on a planet where 70% of surface is water. They developed maritime traditions thousands of years before spaceflight. By the time they reached space, they'd already mastered 3-dimensional combat in fluid medium. The report concluded, the lesson is simple. When an ancient civilization gives you a rule about not fighting a species in a specific environment, that rule exists for a reason. On the moon, Blip Vorn added it to his documentation and opened communication to Elder Council Archive Division. I wish to file formal update to human maritime combat documentation and propose reclassifying from Elder-level classification to required reading for all military commanders. Update approved. Proposal being forwarded to Elder Council. Excellent work! Blip Vorn allowed himself satisfaction. 9 years of soup recipes, and now he'd contributed to one of the archive's most important documents. He added a final note. To future civilizations. If you're reading this because you're considering military action against humans in maritime environments, understand this file exists because multiple civilizations made this mistake. Humans don't need to be aggressive. They simply need to be in their element. And the sea is very much their element. You have been warned. Again. He saved the file and wondered what other secrets were hidden. He typed a search. Ancient warnings that were ignored with catastrophic results. The database returned 847,293 files. His optical stalks perked up. Well then, I know what I'm reading for the next few years. Meanwhile on Earth, life continued with casual normality that drives other species crazy. The engagement was big news for a week, then everyone moved on. The Royal Navy returned to regular duties. Captain Reynolds was awarded a commendation. When asked how he'd remained composed during combat, he replied, "I've been commanding submarines 15 years. You learn to stay calm. Panicking doesn't help anyone." When asked if he'd been worried about the outcome, "We're the Royal Navy. We've been doing this since 1546. We're quite good at it by now." The Krellian supremacy underwent cultural reckoning. Their military reputation was in tatters. They'd become the punchline to jokes across 40 civilizations. High Command issued a decree that all officers must study historical files about humans before conducting operations near Sol System. They created an entire department for learning from our mistakes. Admiral Zixthara, now Senior Historical Research Officer, spent his days in a small office reviewing ancient warnings. He was not allowed to leave. He was not allowed to command anything more significant than his desk lamp. He was required to read 100 historical incident reports weekly. His first assignment, write comprehensive report on the rule about humans and maritime combat, at least 10,000 words, detailed tactical analyses, historical context, recommendations for future commanders. He sat at his desk, stared at a blank document, trying to figure out how to write 10,000 words that boiled down to, "The elders were right, I was wrong, never do what I did." After 3 days, he typed, "In retrospect, ignoring thousands of years of documented evidence was perhaps not my finest moment." He deleted it and started again. By month's end, he'd produced a report that was actually quite good. Thorough, well-researched, filled with useful tactical analyses, also deeply, profoundly humbling to write. The conclusion: the rule exists because humans have been fighting on water longer than most civilizations have existed. They have institutional knowledge spanning centuries. Fighting them at sea is not just tactically inadvisable, it is suicidal. The report became required reading for all Krellian officers above lieutenant. Zixthara was informed his work was adequate and was assigned 17 more reports on various ignored historical warnings. He began understanding this was his life now. Not a warrior, not a commander, a cautionary tale with a desk and a comprehensive library of others' mistakes. 25 years after the second incident, young Krellian officer Thrixval was preparing for her first command. As standard procedure, she reviewed historical files of major military incidents. She opened the second incident file with reluctance. It was national embarrassment, but as she read, Thrixval found herself fascinated, not by the disaster, but by what happened afterward. The humans hadn't gloated. They'd simply returned to normal operations and, when asked, provided detailed educational materials. More than that, they'd welcomed Krellian officers to training programs, shared tactical knowledge, treated former adversaries as future colleagues rather than permanent enemies. That was remarkable. She found Admiral Zixthara's comprehensive analysis. Read it beginning to end. The analysis was brutally honest about mistakes, didn't make excuses, didn't blame subordinates. Simply laid out errors, explained why they were errors, and suggested how to avoid them. She found herself respecting the disgraced admiral. He'd made catastrophic errors, but he'd owned them, learned from them, spent years ensuring future officers wouldn't repeat them. That took courage. She continued reading and found Captain Reynolds' tactical analysis. Remarkably similar to Zixthara's in many ways, but from opposite perspective. It explained what submarines did, why they did it, and how other forces could develop similar capabilities with time and training. It was generous. Thrixval closed the file and sat thinking. She was about to take first command. She'd be responsible for crew lives and safety. The lesson wasn't don't fight humans at sea, though that was certainly part. The real lesson was simpler. Know your limitations, respect your environment, learn from others, and don't let arrogance override judgment. Those were lessons for every aspect of command. She opened her personal log, reviewed second incident files. Initial reaction, embarrassment at Krellian failure. Secondary reaction, respect for both sides. Humans fought with precision and restraint. Admiral Zixthara learned from mistakes and helped others avoid them. Both responses show character. I hope to show similar character if tested. Note to self, read files before making major decisions. Not after. 30 years after the second incident, the Galactic Archive held a symposium celebrating 3 decades of successful preventive documentation. Chief Archivist Blip Vaughan, whose optical stalks had become famous, stood at the podium. 30 years ago, a single civilization made a single mistake, he began. They ignored a warning. They engaged humans at sea, and they learned why that warning existed. The second Krellian incident could have been just another disaster, but it became something more, an educational tool, a model for documenting and learning from mistakes. Today, the Human Maritime Combat File has been accessed over 2 million times, used to train officers across the galaxy, and most importantly, it has prevented conflicts. He displayed statistics. In 30 years, we've documented 47 instances where civilizations planned operations that could have led to conflict with human maritime forces. 47. And in every case, those civilizations read warnings, understood risks, and chose cooperation over confrontation. That's 47 potential conflicts resolved peacefully. Thunderous applause. But we cannot rest on success, he continued. The galaxy is large. New civilizations achieve spaceflight regularly. Our job is ensuring lessons learned are never forgotten. I want to close with a quote from Admiral Reynolds. The sea is not uniquely human territory. We've just been working at it longer. Any species can develop similar capabilities with time and effort. That's the spirit we need. Not, you can't do this, but rather, if you're going to do this, here's how to do it properly. Thank you for helping make the galaxy a place where we learn from history instead of repeating it. The applause was thunderous. Blip Vaughan's optical stalks reached maximum perkiness. He'd made a difference. 50 years after the second incident, Admiral Daniel Reynolds retired. He was 73, having spent 52 years in the Royal Navy. His ceremony was attended by representatives from 15 species, including 3 Krellian officers who'd flown halfway across the galaxy. The Krellian delegation presented Reynolds with a gift, a crystal containing every Krellian analysis of the second incident, every tactical study it inspired, and a handwritten note from Admiral Zixithara, now retired himself. Reynolds read the note aloud. Admiral Reynolds, I am told you are retiring. I wanted to thank you for the lesson you taught me 50 years ago, not the tactical lesson, though that was comprehensive, but the lesson about how to conduct oneself after victory. You could have humiliated us further. Instead, you offered education and cooperation. That example has shaped Krellian military doctrine for 5 decades. We are better officers because of how you chose to win. Thank you. Admiral Zixithara, retired. Reynolds folded the note carefully. Then he addressed the crowd. I'm told the second incident has become legendary. I'm told it's studied at military academies. I'm not sure how I feel about becoming an example. I was just doing my job. But if there's one thing I hope people take from that day, it's this. Victories don't have to create permanent enemies. How you win matters just as much as whether you win. We could have destroyed that fleet. We chose not to, and that choice has resulted in 50 years of cooperation. I'm prouder of that than the tactical victory. He paused. I'm retiring, but the Royal Navy continues. New officers will face their own challenges. I hope they'll remember that power should be used precisely, violence should be a last resort, and mercy is not weakness. He saluted. The crowd saluted back. Somewhere in the Galactic Archive, Blip Vaughan added one more note. Admiral Reynolds retires with honor. His example continues to influence galactic doctrine. The rule remains unbroken. The lesson remains clear. Blip Vaughan leaned back and allowed himself complete satisfaction. He'd spent 57 years in the archive, catalogued millions of files, created new systems, trained dozens of archivists, turned warnings into wisdom. His optical stalks drooped with contentment. This was good work, work that mattered. Tomorrow he'd start organizing the next warning file. The galaxy was large, civilizations were inventive, and mistakes were eternal. But today, he appreciated what was accomplished. One red crystal hidden behind soup recipes had become one of the most important educational documents in Gali.